I'm just
All
looking
right.
because I can't.
I
Sorry.
think we're live.
Okay.
All right.
I was gonna say I can't see the chat. Can I just open it up in another?
Yeah, you should be able to go to the actual YouTube video and see the chat. I don't know. I don't know how many people will get at this hour. I mean, I
Yeah.
know that people are all over the place, but still, I guess
The
for
actual
a YouTube video and see the chat. I don't know. I don't know how many people will get at this hour. I mean, I
Yeah.
know
Sorry.
you're totally fine. I've done that too. The first time I was on Emily's channel, Pukoki's channel. All right, so I guess a belated introduction is in order.
Okay.
All right, so hello guys, Jeffrey here with Auto Alchemy. This is going to be one of my typewriter videos, and so I'm here with Jatshepsut, which I find incredibly hard to say compared to Dark Salmon. I just get very tongue-tied, but that's okay. We've got the artist formerly known as Dark Salmon here, and she is an ISTP, and I'm very excited actually because there's a lot of speculation that one of my favorite writers is an ISTP, and I just think that it's a really rare type, I guess, to find in literary circles. So I'm interested to see where this goes. And did you want to say anything about you or your channel and kind of plug yourself?
I don't know. If people don't want to watch my videos, just skip it. So whatever. I don't know. It is. Yeah. I'm under Jatshepsut. And I just post whatever I want, basically. So.
Yeah, a lot of good thoughts. I think you should check it out, even though I think that you have struggled with the idea of being publicly visible.
Yeah.
All right. Well, awesome. So I guess we should step back from the MBTI stuff for a second and just talk about like your journey as a writer. When did you start writing? What drew you to it? And what does that look like as a progression through your life?
So I actually don't know how. Sorry. I just my thoughts just went in this entire train and I'm starting at the wrong end. But
That's okay.
So I'm not sure how common it is for NTPs to be writers, but I have several NTPs in my family and all of them are writers.
Okay.
So I've always spent a lot of time with my family, like so it was just kind of like you grow up and you write stories, basically. So I never really made a decision to like, oh, I like doing this or whatever necessarily. So it's just kind of weird, honestly.
That is actually very unusual, I think. I really like that and kind of envy that as a family backdrop for your life.
Yeah, it's definitely different. I didn't know it at the time, but I know now that it's kind of weird. But so I guess when I actually started writing, like, actually it was like, oh, I want to actually write a book or do anything with this, was when I was like early teens. And the whole teenage, you're trying to find your identity or whatever and stuff like that. And I was like, well, I'm going to be a writer. And that I have had doubts about that now, but so you spend a lot of time when you're growing up, I suppose just trying to develop yourself and figure out what you want to do. And for me, most of that was writing. I just would, if I was wanting to do this particular thing, or if I was thinking about this particular concept, then I would explore it instead of exploring it like in the real world. I would explore it just writing about these different things. So that was kind of
yeah,
how that happened. But and then I was like, well, I'll try and like have this, make money off of it, or try and actually publish things. I finished a book, but I didn't like it. So then I ended up stopping. I didn't write anymore for several years. And because I actually did a video about this, but well, no, I don't think I did. I just talked about it randomly for some reason. But just because it was so, you know, how I worked through so many things through writing. I'm not absolutely sure. I mean, Michelle commented on the video and she was talking about it and she was like, well, maybe you connected, negative experiences and negative emotions and you were working through it through your writing. But I ended up not writing for a while just because I may have been wrong, but I felt at the time that it was unhealthy for me. So, and then recently I started again and hopefully it will, it will be more healthy this time.
Right. Yeah, I remember you saying that you were writing again, and I was pretty excited by that. Do you feel like it's been good so far?
I think so, yeah. I haven't been working for maybe a month just because I work from home, so I work basically whenever I want to, and
Right.
it's just been hard recently. So I haven't actually been working. So I've been writing a lot more, and so I'm not sure how the transition will go from when I'm actually start working again.
Right.
But yeah, we'll
Yeah,
see.
it can be kind of tricky to juggle. I can't even I say that I can't do this, but I find it very hard to like do YouTube and write. So I don't know. And then to add like having a job on top of that, obviously, is especially a job where you can choose your own schedule. I don't know. I feel like that makes things very tricky.
It's a temptation, yeah, because
Yeah.
especially because I don't have the greatest health, and so if I'm feeling like low energy or I'm feeling depressed or whatever, then I might just be like, oh, I'll just write, and then I don't work, and it's just, yeah, it's complicated.
Yeah. Um, so I guess like one benefit for me, I also work from home, but I have like a slightly more regular schedule. I mean, I have a little bit of flexibility as to when I begin working and when I stop working, but it's usually like within business hours because I work, um, I guess essentially I work in higher education. So I have to be like available for people during office hours.
Right, okay.
Um, but I think that I think that there's a similarity between the two of us in, I guess, like seeing writing as being heavily tied to our energy levels. In a video you made, I think your most recent video, you mentioned that like writing is something that you can just like do, and it's very like low energy intensive,
Yeah,
but
when
you
I
still
do,
accomplish a lot.
exactly, I feel like I'm accomplishing something even though it doesn't affect my mood or my energy as much, so it's kind of, that can be a good thing or it can be a bad thing depending on if there are other things that are more important I should be doing. So yeah.
Right? Yeah, because you can just. It's very like I mean, I guess not low effort necessarily, but you can get a reward very quickly with the amount of work you're putting in. Like it can become this snowball of dopamine, and it's very appealing when it's going well, and when it's not going well, don't talk to me.
Yeah.
um, I guess on the topic of having like an unhealthy relationship, and I know I'm jumping around a lot, but you said earlier that writing was kind of a negative experience for a while. Was that mainly just like the self-indulgent aspect of writing where you're just like alone with your thoughts and you kind of get lost in the labyrinth of your thoughts, or is there more to it than that?
I think that is definitely true. I have problems with communicating with people. When I was, especially when I was younger, I had undiagnosed selective mutism. So I don't like going around saying I have it because it's not diagnosed, but whatever. Where I just wouldn't talk
Mhm.
and stuff like that. So when I got into writing, then I would just, it was even more of a reason for me not to have to, uh, talk to people. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? Because I could just write what I was thinking and nobody had to know about it. You know what I mean?
I see.
and
Yeah,
then and then plus that there was oh, sorry, I just lost my thought. Um
you're okay.
uh, oh yeah, the whole identity thing where, you explore who you are and stuff like that, and I was exploring who I was through writing, but at the same time writing is a very creative, constructive type process. So in a sense, you can judge your writing and be like, it needs to be more this way or it needs to be more this way. You know what I mean? And because it became so kind of part of, um, basically, I ended up trying to construct myself in a sense, like I was trying to change who I naturally was because it would be better this way. You know, I'd write something, you know, and that would be like an expression of myself. And then I'd be like, well, it'd be better this way. And so then I would try and change that. And then in a sense, I was trying to change how my mind works and stuff like
Right.
that. And so it just got into this very complicated relationship where I was trying to, I can't think of the word, but just trying to change how I naturally worked to a way that I thought critically was a better way.
Right.
You know?
So what I'm hearing, and you can correct me obviously if I'm wrong, but I guess I'm hearing that when you pour so much of your identity into the work, but you're also critical of the work, then it becomes unhealthy as far as like becoming critical of yourself by extension and getting really bogged down in that I don't know, hypercritical process or
Yeah, yeah,
hmm. Yeah. So when you say you tried to change, I mean, maybe this is a good time to segue into the MBTI stuff a little bit, but I mean, do you feel like you were trying to make yourself into something different as far as like cognitive functions go? Were you trying to,
yeah. I would
yeah,
say so. I especially I don't have a very I don't talking to Michelle has given me a better understanding of introverted feeling,
yeah,
especially other people, but especially Michelle.
yeah,
Um, but so I do have somewhat of an understanding now. But um, I looking back, I would say that that was the one that I focused on a lot, where I would try and make myself more introverted feeling than I
hmm,
am. And the thing is, you can strengthen parts of, and this is my opinion. You can strengthen parts of your personality, and you can use them. And I feel like there's always a time and a place to use every function, and we're always interacting with all the functions. You know what I mean?
right,
But if you try and focus on um, one of your lesser functions, and you try and make that your identity, when it isn't your identity, it can be destructive. You know what I
yeah,
mean?
definitely a standard that you could never live up to. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's kind of funny. I don't think that Michelle and I talked about this live last night, but maybe we did. At some point, I think after we ended the broadcast, we kept talking for a little bit, and we were talking about writing because she and I have been exchanging chapters of our novels, and the protagonist in my book, or I guess one of the main characters, I think of as the central character. She is an INFP, so I like picked something that would be challenging for me because I'm allegedly, FI blind. And I mean, I think I would not have been really ready for that project if I hadn't done a lot of other writing beforehand, but I finally felt like I was in a place where I could kind of explore this function, this perspective towards life in a way that wouldn't just like completely destroy me and and also in a way that I wouldn't butcher it or do it a disservice. And I think that I've done an okay job.
hmm
Michelle is commenting, by the way, on the video. I don't know if you've seen, but she's very sweet.
Yeah, I'm afraid if I look at the comments, then I'm going to completely lose track of what you're saying because I have problems with focusing. So
Yeah, well, I can. I will be the messenger here.
okay.
So it's only Michelle right now. She said that she relates to the conversation so much, choosing between work, writing, and YouTube. And apparently the video is only focusing on you right now.
Oh, great.
So I'll have to fix that. And then she said that she's helping you learn about FI and has 2 hearts.
Okay.
So she's very happy to be of service in that way. Let's see, how did I mess this up? Talk for a second. Okay,
Okay.
I think we're jumping back and forth now. I totally screwed up earlier, but
Okay.
that's okay.
Well, at least you got to see more of my face.
Yeah, now there's more footage of you outside of a vehicle, and people
Mhm.
know that you don't live in
Over
your
the
car.
car.
Okay. So let's see. I kind of know the answer to this question, but I guess for the sake of the YouTube audience, what sorts of things are you writing if you could put it into a genre?
I always say speculative fiction.
Okay. So both fantasy and sci-fi. I mean, if you had to, maybe
Yeah,
those.
fantasy
Yeah.
and sci-fi, and also paranormal. I don't really do paranormal as much.
Oh, okay. That's pretty cool. Um, what do you think it is that draws you to those particular areas?
I'm not sure. I know a lot of people say that like ISTPs are not imaginative and they don't really like stuff like that. But I just get really bored by books that are not speculative. Even reading, like I always read sci-fi and fantasy. I don't know. I just get bored.
Right.
Not, it's like it doesn't. I don't know. It just doesn't engage me as much. It's not complicated enough, I guess.
Hmm. So, so you definitely don't like things that are more like straightforwardly literary.
No.
Hmm.
Well, I don't mind reading it, but I can't write it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I, I totally get that stereotype about ISTPs, but I think that you should be, I mean, relatively balanced between sensing and intuition in your own way, a way that's completely foreign to the way that I think about this stuff. But
Yeah,
I
we're
don't,
on different frequencies.
yeah, I don't think that that is a fair stereotype, like
Neither
most.
do I.
Yeah, and I could see that stuff as being like a way to feed your NI a little bit.
Mhm.
Especially, I mean that's sort of like I feel like there's such a huge resonance between the idea of like NI and speculative, like especially with stuff that's
It's
like more.
speculative.
Go
Sorry,
ahead.
I was just gonna say it's speculative in the sense that not that anything could be possible, but you kind of decide on what you think should be possible or will be possible, if that makes any sense. That's kind of how I think
Yeah,
sometimes.
it's very forward looking, and I think that that perfectly gels with what I think of with NI. Oh yeah, Michelle was actually asking what you meant by speculative fiction.
Oh,
So, I mean, I think that she asked that question before you gave more of an exposition on it. I think
yeah.
we.
Basically, speculative fiction is anything that doesn't happen in a normal real world.
Yeah. Yeah, I like some straightforward like literary fiction, but I need some element of the fantastical or the surreal or something has
Yeah,
to
I
be.
know. I mean, even if it's not like completely speculative, if there's some sort of like, I don't want to say like over dramatic, but some sort of like you feel like it just couldn't happen, even if technically physically it could. If that makes any sense.
Hmm.
That's cool too.
Yeah.
Sorry, what were you gonna say?
Oh, it beats me. I very easily lose track of what I'm thinking. Very easily distracted. I think I wanted to say something about, well, so whenever I was kind of thinking about this, I was doing some digging to try to find ISTP writers, and I didn't have a lot of luck. Um, and something that occurred to me is like, well, I could see an ISTP being a very good technical writer, like writing like a
That's more.
motorcycle manual or something, And I mean, does that resonate with you? Do you feel like that would be within your skill set, even if it's not what you do?
I have kind of thought about that. I'm not a very good technical writer though because um I don't know. It's just this weird thing when when I'm writing, I don't. Sorry, I haven't really thought about this. I'm gonna have to figure out words to
It's
describe it.
okay.
When I'm trying to write something, I'm so focused on trying to make it accurate, like every single word accurate, that I end up not being completely intelligible, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think so.
So I'll say something or I'll create a sentence that is technically very very correct. Like it describes perfectly what I'm trying to say,
Hmm.
but it's not um someone else looking at it would have to spend a lot of time looking at it and trying to figure out what it means in order to understand, which isn't the greatest when you're trying to, you know, when you're doing technical writing. You want this person to just read it and make it as easy as possible for them to understand. Not necessarily as accurate as possible, but easy to understand. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't really do that well.
Okay. Yeah, I could see that. I think that's a good distinction to make. Accuracy is not always intelligibility. Especially, I mean, you know, I also use introverted thinking, right? And I think that for people who favor it, there can be a tendency to over explain
Yeah,
because
overcomplicate.
you're giving all of the blocks, but some even stuff that people just kind of take for granted, and that's excessive information.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you think so? And your fiction writing, does that show up at all?
Yes.
Yes.
One of the criticisms I got when not recently, because no one has read any of my recent writing, but earlier, one of the things people would say is they'd read something and they'd be like, well, that was interesting, but I didn't understand anything that happened.
Oh, okay. Huh. I have to see some of this to see what they're getting at, or where they're coming from.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, I don't know how to describe it any better. It's just that it's almost like you give all the information except the most essential part for knowing what's happening, because all the information is already in my mind, you know what I mean? And then I'm
right,
trying to give it to someone else, but then I give this huge bulk of it that they don't really want, and then I leave out the one thing that is like the key to it, you know what I mean? And they're like, yeah, I don't even.
hmm. Yeah, I see what you're saying. I do that intentionally sometimes, where it's like I want people to realize that there is some sort of framework or picture, but I want them to be like the final piece of the puzzle, like to work it through themselves.
Mm-hmm.
But I
Yeah, I
don't know.
suppose that could work in some contexts, but
Yeah, but I mean, you'd have to do it intentionally, right? It shouldn't be an accident.
yeah, yeah,
um, okay, cool. So I guess with introverted thinking as your first function, how do you think that that informs your writing? Do you feel like you have, well, I mean, you said earlier that you try to kind of explore a topic, and I guess reading into that, I heard like getting things sort of like logically clear and seeing how it all fits together, which is something that I do. But I don't want to put words in your mouth. So if you wouldn't mind expanding on what role that function plays for you as a writer.
So, sorry. So you're asking how
That wasn't actually a question, unfortunately, but
Mhm. Okay.
I was hoping that the question would be implied, but I definitely butchered that. That was barely a sentence. Probably wasn't a sentence. But yeah, more or less, like, how do you think introverted thinking informs your writing?
Um, yeah, I'm not even sure where to start. I guess I don't know. I think the TIFE axis might be a better starting point for me, just because
Sure,
that came to mind. But
sure.
I feel like, because TI is the dominant function, and then FE is the fourth slot. I kind of have this desire to be really like convey emotions and convey relationships between characters and stuff like that, but I don't really do it well.
Right.
And I tend to, um, that's another criticism that people had, was that they didn't really relate to the characters, which is, I think, the most hurtful criticism that I've gotten, because I relate to them, you know what I mean? So it's kind of like,
Oh,
I'm not
yeah.
really sure, you're not really sure how to solve, that problem.
Hmm.
But basically I feel like, I kind of, I'm sorry, I see everything so visually. It's like I'm looking at TI and I'm like, um,
Yeah, and then how do you
But,
put that visual into words? I get
yeah,
it. You can take your time. No rush.
yeah, so it's like when I'm trying to write a scene, or just trying to think over when I've been writing for the past couple months, but when I'm trying to write something out, it's just, and for one thing, it's just hard to think of it TI in isolation, but TI SE together, it's like you kind of have to have this. Everything has to be very coherent. Like every person that's there, every event that happens, every like the shape of the space that the people that the characters are in,
Hmm.
the progression of events. And sometimes there's several different things happening, and so the progression of events, and you'd have like these two lines, and I have to make sure that every event is lined up exactly, and I have to know exactly where each event is and how they connect to each other. And then, like, if there's two people in a room and they're doing two different things, you know what I mean? And it's not, I mean, I understand that it's not super important whether one person does this thing a half a second before the other person does this other thing, but I have to know, you know what I mean? It's kind of like
Yeah.
it's this video image in my head when I'm writing something. I always have to have it figured out beforehand. And it's like this video image 3D of like space that it's happening, and everyone who's there and everything that's there and what it looks like and how each person experiences it.
Hmm.
And it all has to be very, very coherent. Like it has to be as if it could literally happen, as
Yeah.
if I had experienced it myself. If you experience something, everything obviously works because it happens. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
All right, I didn't say that very well, but if you take an action, it's not like you're going to miss some part of the action by accident because it is an action. It happened. You know what I mean?
Right.
And if I'm writing something and I'm creating this action, it has to have that level of reality
Hmm.
in my mind. And also because of TI, I kind of put too many of those details in there also, what we were talking about earlier, where
Right.
everything that happens I have to know, and then because I know it, I have to express it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. So it's almost like you are doing this journalistic thing where you're just reporting on some pre-existing mental construction. You're like modeling it with your
Yeah,
language, and you have
yeah.
to perfectly. Yeah. Hmm. That's really fascinating. That's hard for me to wrap my head around because I struggle so much. I mean, I get it in part because I have some trouble writing about something if I don't fully understand like where everything is in relation to everything else and how it's all kind of connected. But I do think of it more in a nebulous kind of way. I think that might be what NE actually stands for. It's short for
Maybe.
nebulous. Yeah. But to think, well, do you feel especially attached to all of those details? Like once you get them in there, are you able to prune them away, or do you feel like they're vital as part of the piece once they're there?
I think that would be, well, just the first thing that came to mind is that's an SE versus SI thing. I couldn't personally look at my novel and say, oh, this is unnecessary, I can take that out. But if I let someone else look at it and they were like, they give me, SE is a very, it's a very response oriented thing. I think a lot, all extroverted functions have to do with, people's responses in a sense.
Mhm.
So SE, you do something and then you look at how people respond. Okay, that's one part of it. And so I have to, if I wanted to improve something, I would have to let someone else look at it, and then I would look at how they react, and then I would decide, well, this is the reaction I wanted. Now I have to change this. It's kind of a trial and error sort of thing. Like,
Right.
show this work, what's the response, and then
Hmm.
redo it, and until I get the response that I'm looking for.
I gotcha.
So initially, I just write it all out, and then
Uh-huh.
I'd have to show it to someone, and then they would have to read it and be like, "This is the impression I got. This is the experience I had from reading this." And then I'd be like, "Well, that's not what I really wanted." You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. Do you feel like you have to then outsource, like, the sense of, um so if you need to get everything on the page to be satisfied, are you comfortable, though, if someone says, "Alright, like, 30% of this is more than most people want to read," or, like or is it really just gonna be dependent upon the situation? Like, somebody will give you a full reaction and then you tweak based on that and you don't really like pay as much attention to specificity of feedback or critique. I don't That was also a very long-winded question. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, I'm sorry. It's so hard for me to listen, so I kind of lost the first half of what you said by the time you got the second half. So
I need to rein it in a little bit, just in general, to be
sorry.
honest. Um, I guess I guess the question is, do you feel that you outsource um, some of the editorial stuff to other people, especially with like pruning things? Like, if somebody tells you to prune something, do you just trust their judgment typically, or is it gonna be more situational?
Um, I think the main thing is I don't really care. After I write the book and I let someone read it and they tell me what their impression is basically what matters, I think. And so
Hmm,
I don't really mind changing or taking out what they wanted me to take out or whatever, but I think the thing that I would hold on to is if they're like, um, it needs to have a different direction or it needs to be a different kind of story or there's
yeah,
too much of this or too much of that, and I'm like, "Well, you know what? That's what I wanted, and I don't really care what you
right,
think about that." You know what I mean? That's my intention when I wrote this, and if you don't have the same intention as me, then I don't really care about your impressions. You know what I mean? Does
right.
that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, it makes complete sense. Like, you only care about feedback from people who understand what you're trying to accomplish because their feedback is going to be actually constructive in,
Yeah.
executing that goal. Yeah, totally get that. Michelle says that you need better readers and that she is volunteering to be one of your readers.
Yeah, I've been actually wanting to read her book too recently, but yeah. Anyways.
Yeah, I've been reading it. It's very good. So I think you should get in touch, but
Okay.
that's between the two of you. I'm not going to say anything more on that front.
Well, something interesting you guys talked about in yours, one of your I think you've done 2 videos together now. I can't remember which
Mhm.
one it was, but, um, you were talking about the purposes behind your books, like, you had this concept that you kinda wanted to change people's ideas about something, or she wanted to change people's values, and
Yeah,
you had this idea behind it, and I was listening to it, and I kind of felt, like, almost guilty, you know what I mean? Because I don't really have that, you know what I mean? I don't really wanna change anything. Oh, kind I mean, the world could be better, but anyway,
I don't
um
think that you should feel guilty about that. That's probably I mean, I don't think that Michelle will be mad at me for saying this, but I think that we both have, in our own way, some weird savior complex. So, I mean, that's a problem, I think, for myself anyway, but
Yeah. No, but it was just really interesting for me to hear though, listening to it, because then I was like, "Well, what is the purpose of my book?" I mean, you guys have these grand purposes, and I'm like, What purpose is it?" You know what I mean? But I don't really have, like, a conceptual purpose. I feel like
hmm,
it may be more of an FE purpose where,
yeah.
where the characters, I just want them to be happy, if that makes any sense.
Oh, you want the characters to be happy,
Well, the characters
not
well
necessarily the readers?
Well, vicariously, the readers would be.
Yeah.
That's the kind of the point, you know what I mean? Where if the character this is how I experience other fiction, where I go through something and I'm able to think about it and I'm interested in it, and the characters end up happy, you know what I mean? I don't like sad endings. I mean, I used to when I was younger because I was kinda like, emo, whatever,
Yeah.
but now it's like, if I wanna be happy, you know what I mean? And so, I
Right.
want characters to be happy because otherwise it's just like I feel
Hmm.
and I
So
mean sorry.
Oh no, I don't know. I think you probably have something of more substance to say than I have, so go for it.
I was just gonna say that I'm not saying that my books are actually very happy.
Oh,
And
okay.
just the ending has to have some kind of
Hope,
hope or some kind of something, you know what I mean?
a glimmer, yeah. Yeah, I think for the most part, I'm the same way. I've written a couple of morbid stories, but in general, I like to end on a happier note.
Hmm.
Especially, well, that's actually something that I wanted to ask you about. So I'm glad you brought that up because, well, especially since you are interested in speculative fiction, I didn't know if you had like a certain vision for the future that you wanted to bring about what you were doing, but yeah,
No.
it's pretty fascinating how different people can be. I guess that's what this whole MBTI thing is about, huh?
Yeah.
Um, have you ever read any Cormac McCarthy?
No. I've heard that name, but I don't have any I don't know what the connection is, and I've never read it.
Okay, he is one of my favorite writers, probably top 3. I don't wanna rank people in real time right now because 'cause I'd have to think it through, but yeah, I mean, his stuff is very like, he kinda writes Westerns, but they're not really Westerns, they're very, like, biblical and apocalyptic, and I don't know. He's the one that I think is an ISTP, and it's just for me, it's completely insane the level of like sensory detail. Like he very quickly switches between like all of the sensory detail and then like these weird introverted intuition like insights, and it's really effective for me. So I think that's like one exciting thing about the idea of an ISTP writer is like that ability to shift gears like that, and to see maybe like some sort of intuitive vision that's lurking behind all of the sensory details, if that makes sense. I don't know if you have
Yeah.
anything to respond to with that, but I think you should check him out because I do think that he's an ISTP and maybe you'd
Okay,
get something
well,
out of it.
that is interesting though, but there was a question I was actually gonna ask you. I don't know if I should you're the interviewer. As the
No,
temp for you.
I prefer conversations.
Okay. But, when I was watching your first typewriters, I think, you were talking about description and, SI writers and SE writers and that kind of thing,
Yeah.
and, what I was curious about, though, was you write a certain way, but do you always want to read books that are the same, if that makes any sense? Do you prefer books that have more sense? I mean, you said you mentioned in one of your videos that you have a hard time, like, you might change the number of chairs or just keeping track of sensory things, you know what I mean? But do you prefer a book that kind of has very little sensory details, or would
Mm,
you prefer books that have a lot of sensory details and then you can form connections with those details?
that's a really good question. I feel like I try to enjoy a pretty diverse range of literature. So with the guy I just mentioned, Cormac McCarthy, those books are way more, I guess, SE filled than I typically like, but I think he does it really well. So it's like a good paradigm for how it should be done. But typically, I prefer to gravitate towards things that have less sensory detail, but not. I mean, if it's too abstract, then I can't connect to it. It has to have enough sensory detail that then I can like project my own any inside of it and fill it out a little bit. I think.
Mm, okay. Yeah.
That's how I conceive of it. So I guess you tend probably to read the same kind of stuff that you're writing, right?
No, actually, that's why I asked because I always read any books. At
Oh,
least what I
okay.
think of as any. Um,
Hmm.
have you ever read, anything by Charles Williams?
Mm-mm.
I was hoping you had, because I may be wrong about whether he's NE or not, but I think he is.
Ah, okay.
Um,
Hmm.
and there's other writers too that I'm thinking of, but, and they And then there's the NE-SI is on an axis, but there's more SI writers, and then there's more NE writers, if that makes any sense. And I tend to like both of those, where either there's just like there's so much useless sensory information like the SI, where they're just detailed, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I don't necessarily read all of it. When I'm reading a book, my eyes kind of go up and down instead of side to side.
Oh, interesting. Huh.
So I kind of skip a lot of it, kind of. I mean, if there's something important, I'll just be like, oh, I'll slow down.
Mhm.
But I love a huge amount of detail, like a huge amount of detail, more detail than I give. And when I'm talking about, earlier when I was talking about SE, and giving all this detail, I don't actually do a huge amount of descriptive detail, but what I do give has to be very accurate, and it's very linear, if that makes any sense. It
Yeah.
has to, yeah. I don't give a lot of details. If I'm not careful, then I can just move way too quickly, and then
Yeah.
the entire book is just like a page or whatever.
Yeah. I've seen that before.
Yeah,
Huh.
but I love books that have very metaphysical um ideas, or just, I'm losing the words, but it's just hard to describe what
Mhm.
just seems any to me. And obviously I don't
Yeah.
have an understanding of any, but what I do understand of any, it just seems like just the books that don't take the NISE takes itself seriously, in a sense, like this has to be real or it's not valuable, you know what I mean? But NESI, I've always kind of felt like, not like I want to be NESI, because I'm not, you know what I mean? But just
Yeah.
I value it so much, not for myself, but for interacting with, where
Right.
they don't take themselves as seriously as much, in a sense. And I'm not sure if I'm getting this across very well, because I mean, you take yourself seriously, but it's just you can hold you can hold you can hold like, you can have 2 ideas at once, and it
Yeah.
doesn't bother you. Whereas me, it's very hard for me to have 2 ideas at once, if that makes any sense, like, to take them seriously at the same time, you know what I mean? Because, yeah,
Yeah.
they don't both exist, you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
so I kind of have to pick,
Hmm.
and if I'm going to think about it, you know what I mean?
Right.
Whereas, your philosophical discussion earlier with the 2 NE DOMs, it's just like, you're just talking about all these different things, and I really kind of admire that, or kind of want that, you know what I mean? Because it's just more relaxed sense of ideation, a much more relaxed ideation than my NI ideation, you know what I mean? And
Right.
it's like I can kind of relax and just kind of just think, you know what I mean? Just kind of think and not really care as much as I normally do, you know what I mean?
Mhm. Mhm.
And that's where, a lot of, wisdom or truth or whatever comes from, is just being able to relax and think about things, you know what I mean? Instead
Right.
of having to be right or true or absolutely whatever, you know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, no, I find that really resonates because I see it from the opposite perspective where it's like, gosh darn it, it would be nice to have like a little bit of the cognitive closure that I think comes with the other axis.
Yeah.
Sometimes you end up feeling as an any dom a little too untethered or ungrounded, and it's exhausting in its own way.
Yeah.
Michelle
They both
says
they both
some
need each other.
Michelle says some would call us unfocused and unable to come to conclusions. And yeah, I mean
Well,
that's fair.
that's one half of it, I guess.
Yeah, I mean everything has its there's a duality to all of it, right?
Mhm.
There's no one best way to be,
Yeah,
unfortunately.
everything is negative and positive.
Yeah. Let's see. Did I have any other questions for you? I know that I did, but I just have a horrible memory. Um, okay. So, what sort of like tools or frameworks do you use with your writing? I've kind of struggled to determine what I've struggled to determine like how to identify those things through the functions. Like sometimes I think that using these pre-packaged ideas like the 3 act like story is like a TE like tool that already exists in the world. And sometimes I'll use that stuff, but I have like my own internal model for how to build a story. And I was wondering if you have like your own sort of models that you're not getting from anywhere else, but that you use to work through a plot or through, I don't know, building a character.
Yeah, I think for people with high TI, TE is also high, but it's not like valued. Like you
Yeah.
can use it if you don't really want to.
Yeah. If I have to, I'll do it.
Yeah, exactly. That's
Yeah.
kind of my my idea of it too. But so I do know a lot about different TE frameworks. I've read it and stuff like that in the past. And a lot of the time I just take all of them and then I try and make them all coherent together, you know what I mean? And it just doesn't work.
No, there's only so sometimes you can find like neat areas of overlap, but you can't make it all cohere.
And you get to this point where so many parts, but like it's a 3 act, but it's like a metaphysical 3 act, it's not like, and then this other one you got in here, this is a a different layer of metaphysics, you know what I mean, of the story. So it's still there, you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's something that makes me feel a little bit ashamed because I'm definitely like that, where it's like I don't know, I'm pretty sure I said this in my conversation with Michelle on my channel, but I was like, I think of like the story circle or the hero's journey, not only for like the main plot, but then I think of it in relation to like the reader. What kind of journey are they going on? And then what kind of journey am I going on as a writer? And
Yeah,
it's
and
like,
all the different characters and yeah, everything, like in the
yeah,
world as a whole, or yeah. So it's the way I'm like, oh, I gotta include everything. I just gotta fit it in somehow. But I kind of haven't been doing that as much just because it takes up too much time and I just wanted
yeah.
to write. So, um,
But you don't think you have like your own TI sort of system for working through it, or do you?
um, I kind of like when I'm doing anything, I kind of have a system, but it's kind of a case by case sort of system. Like it's the whole SE reactionary type of thing where I TISE is it's not so much creative as it is critical in my opinion. That's one reason why I think ISTPs don't write very much. And
Yeah.
uh, uh, this is a completely different thing. I do not want to say it right now, or I will lose what I'm saying. But
Okay.
remind me later. Coming up with story ideas. Maybe you can bring that up again later. But
Okay.
So what I was saying was, yeah, case by case. So when I'm writing or creating a story or doing anything really, like just putting an operating system on my computer or whatever, it's not like I kind of have this framework of this is how you do an operating system or this is how you write a story. But it doesn't take me very long to do it or to make it work, just because it's just very reactionary. I come to a problem and then I'm like,
Hmm.
well, I'll figure this out. And then I've got this TI kind of like, I'm not sure what to call it, like a TI. It's just kind of in my mind, and then I come to this problem, and I'm like, okay, let's use TI and fix this, and then I do that, and then I move on. You know what I mean? So
Right.
it's not like this
Huh.
framework that I could tell you about or anything like that. It comes out different every time. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that makes more sense. Like I see that TISE might be more reactive to a problem in that way and treat it as like an individual thing to tackle, whereas I
Yeah.
try to have like a general like pattern that I superimpose on all the problems, which can get me into trouble. Um, hmm,
Yeah.
yeah. Michelle wants to know what your story is about that you're currently working on.
Um. So it's um it's sci-fi, but it's more of an old style type sci-fi where it's mixed in with fantasy a lot. I
Uh-huh.
think new sci-fi people try to put definitions on them, and so they're trying to like, no, it has to be just technology or whatever. But um, like the older kinds of sci-fi is it's basically fantasy. I feel like it's just the attitude towards it more than the actual events that makes the difference between sci-fi and fantasy.
Yeah.
Because the events can be very similar.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's sci-fi, all that to say. And essentially it's in the future, but it doesn't have a very futuristic type attitude. It's just, it is in the future.
Right.
Things have happened. And essentially the Earth is kind of being attacked by shape-shifting aliens. And this one character got captured by them and learned a bunch of weird metaphysical stuff, and came back to Earth. And well, my version of metaphysical might not be the actual definition of what metaphysical is, but she ends up escaping, and then she's on Earth trying to save the world, kind of. She's not personally trying to save the world, but she's just trying to get somebody to save the world, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. Knowing what she knows, like, yeah, I
Yeah.
see. I think that there are a few different definitions of metaphysical, so yours probably fits safely within one of those. Um,
Okay.
yeah. When you say she learns metaphysical things, are you saying that she learns things about like the fundamental nature of reality, and that's like the information she's trying to leverage in saving the world, or are you saying something else?
Yeah, I would say the fundamental nature of reality, but I would not say in a theoretical sense, because she doesn't really know exactly what's going on necessarily, but she does know how to leverage it.
Gotcha. Okay. I want more information, but I'm not gonna I'm not gonna poke you and prod you for the info.
Yeah, but what the thing is there's a very fine line between what I'm making up in this, and it is fantastical to some extent, because I don't believe that everything that happens in this novel could happen in our real world, but I think some of it could. So
Okay.
I'm kind of, there's not much of a line between one of I assume you watched Michelle's video a few weeks ago about how she was talking about the non-linearness of time.
Yeah, but I think I watched it while I was working, so I didn't really process it very deeply.
Yeah. Okay. So I so she was talking about how sometimes time, how she thinks of time as being kind of we think of it as being like a line, right?
Right.
And she was saying that the line could be like bent, and different parts of the line could touch each other. And it's
Yeah.
not necessarily, even if it is a line in one sense, that doesn't mean that there's no connections between different points on. Does that make any sense?
Yeah.
At least that's one of my interpretations of what she was talking about. She talked about several different things, but and then we were talking about the reality of, you know, of like space and consciousness and interactions between consciousness and different areas of time and space, and how things interact with each other. And so I don't have a very strong understanding of how any of this might work or why any of these things happen. But with my SE, whatever, I'm like, well, people have experienced these things, so therefore they exist. You know what I mean?
Okay. Yeah.
And so, I'm not sure if I'm coming at this very coherently, but
No, I'm following you so far.
okay. So basically, what I'm trying to say is that I think that reality is, and this. Oh, sorry, I'll just say. I'm sorry. Oh.
We're having a philosophical Saturday over here. I like it. I'm stealing Michelle's idea for my channel now.
Yeah. Okay. So basically, people
Socratic Saturdays. Sorry, didn't mean to cut you off.
basically, there are certain experiences of reality that are not explained by naturalistic or typical naturalistic philosophies.
Sure.
Okay? And people have these experiences, and I don't want to deny that they have these experiences. Okay? And that's one thing that kind of irritated me when Michelle was talking. Well, sorry, Michelle, but when she was talking about how, you know, people with SE don't like believe in spiritual things. And that doesn't really resonate with me. You know what I mean? Because spiritual things are an experience and therefore a reality as much as physical things. If that makes any sense. I mean, spiritual things meaning anything that's just kind of weird. If that makes
Right.
sense.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Even if you can't conceptualize it or put it in a framework, the
It's still,
experience itself.
yeah, it exists. Okay.
Yeah.
In
Okay.
some sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't understand it. You know what I mean? But I believe it exists. You know what I mean? So
Hmm. Now, you believe that even if you haven't had the experience yourself.
yeah. I mean, obviously I would kind of try and choose who I listen to.
Yeah.
But I do tend to be somewhat naive, I will admit. But and people, I think that's any polar, but I'm not sure. But
I could see it.
um, if someone tells me that they have an experience, I don't naturally just be like, "Well, no, you didn't." You know what I mean? Because I didn't have that experience. That just seems kind of stupid to me.
I see.
It has to be offensive.
I
But
really like that. I think that there might be something more like less cognitive function based in there and more like character based because like if you were
yeah,
more arrogant and more of a jerk, then maybe you would just automatically discount anything that fell outside of your own personal experience. But I don't know.
okay, yeah, maybe. But yeah, it just doesn't make any sense to me to say that something doesn't exist because I haven't experienced it. That just
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, I think that yeah, Michelle, you made Michelle cry. So no,
What?
I'm just kidding. She admitted to being guilty of stereotyping, and then she used a sad face. So,
Okay. Yeah,
um,
I'm not. I mean, she doesn't have SE. I'm not. And I don't have a great understanding of the functions that I have. Low. It's just it did
right,
irritate me a little bit. So yeah.
yeah. I mean, I think that's a good point that you've brought up, though, and the Cormac McCarthy, the ISTP, is like one of the most spiritual writers that I've ever encountered. To be honest, um, it's not always like on the page. It's more like this NI ghost, like I said earlier, lurking behind all of the sensory details, and it's not something that's necessarily being um, fully encapsulated in a TI framework. He like doesn't bother to try to define what's going on, but it's like very clear there's something like jumping out as being spiritually significant underneath the words, and I think that's really cool. I mean, I don't think that like every ISTP is going to be like that. A lot of
Yeah.
ISTPs that I know are like do fit the stereotype a little more, where they're just like good old mechanic type guys, where they're just like, I just want to work on things in the physical world. I don't really want to like have any sort of speculation about what's going on beyond that. Just
Yeah.
me and my car, or me and my computer, me and my guitar.
Yeah. I mean, I get that. Maybe it's just. I mean, maybe the reason I'm more cerebral or whatever is just because I spent so much time by myself, or because I didn't talk a lot or whatever, and so I ended up SE. What I didn't develop my SE very much, so I was kind of what they call it a TI-NI loop.
Yeah.
And I spent a lot of time when I was younger just thinking, not necessarily doing a lot. And I spent time with animals. I'd just sit there for hours with goats and stuff like that, and not really doing anything. Um,
Hmm.
so a lot of time thinking, and a lot of time just the whole TI thing where you want everything to be coherent. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And if something isn't right, you know what I mean? It's not like I mean, maybe SE naturally would be like, if it's outside of my experience, then it doesn't exist. But TI would be like, that's stupid. Does that make sense? You know, because that doesn't make any sense to say that.
Right.
So my TI would be like, it has to be right, or I won't, live by that rule or whatever.
Right. Yeah. You wanted to bring things back to story ideas and where they come from, and I did not forget, despite my
Okay.
typically horrible memory. So
Amazing. So, yeah, I was just gonna say, it was just like a side thing. I was just gonna say that the whole any ideational, I hate that part of writing, which is kind of weird.
oh.
A lot of people say, I get this idea, but then I don't write it. Well, I don't get ideas, but I really want to write. So
I guess it's better than not getting ideas and writing regardless,
I guess, yeah. It's like when I was gonna start writing again, I'm like, oh, I really want to write now because everyone's talking about writing, and it was something I really enjoyed and stuff like that. So, and I'm like, so what am I gonna write? And that was where I kind of was like, oh man, I didn't want to think of any ideas. I mean, I can think of ideas. I think that's another misconception, is just because NEs have any polar readings, I can't think of ideas. I can think of ideas. I just hate them all. You know what I mean?
I see. Yeah.
I enjoy it. I don't like it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
it's a trickster function. Like you
yeah.
can't really like view them objectively. Everyone just in the same way that like people tell me sometimes, just rely on your values and on your like emotional like judgments of things. And I'm like, no, because those are all telling me that everything is worthless and I should hate everything. So I can't like,
Exactly.
it's not a good compass for me.
Yeah, exactly. I can't
Yeah.
rely on it. I mean, it's there, but I just can't rely on it.
Yeah.
So that's always the hardest part.
Huh.
But now that I've been writing for a while on this book, it's not really a problem because, like I said, I feel like SETI is more uh, critical, not in a negative sense, but just critical more than creative. And so once I actually have something to work on, I can kind of build off of that, and it's fine. I can
Oh,
make
I
it,
see.
you know what I mean, add parts to it and stuff like that once I actually have it.
Oh, so you just have to like let that filter fall away for a bit and then you can apply
Yeah,
your prowess to it. Yeah.
yeah.
I get that.
Wouldn't say prowess, but yeah.
I think it's probably prowess. More so than you think. But yeah, that's good. So how far along are you in this story? How much have you generated?
Actual writing or what I have thought of.
I guess actual writing, and then you can tell me what you thought of.
Okay, just a second. I'll check the word count actually,
Okay.
because I haven't checked it in a minute. I mean, in a couple days. So on my main document, I'm at 17,000, no, 16,700.
That's pretty solid.
Yeah, and then I have another document where I write other scenes that are not in linear order, which I try to avoid doing, but I still do it.
Mhm.
I'm not sure how much is in that one, but
I actually get a lot of mileage out of writing non-linearly. It really helps me, but I see how it could be really challenging to somebody who does want to get like all of the pieces just right and then model
yeah,
that with the
yeah,
language.
exactly. If I write too many scenes out of order, then when I come up to those scenes later, the path of the story has kind of gotten off slightly, and then it's hard to kind of put the scene in, and it doesn't work very well.
Yeah.
But I still do it just because I get these kind of visions in my mind, and I'm like, I know I'm gonna forget it if I don't write it down, and I really like this part. So
Yeah. Um, Michelle wants to know if first of all, how do you get your ideas if you're hating all the ones that you're generating? Like, I guess my addition to that would be, do you just take the ideas you hate and run with them, or do you have like a process for actually filtering things out?
well, it's kind of just based on experience. I know from experience that if I take an idea and I work on it, eventually I won't hate it as much.
Right.
So that's part of it. And
Yeah.
so I try and, instead of basing which idea off of which one I like more, because I don't like any of them, I'll base it off of just, out of all the stories I've written in the past, which were the most successful? Is this more like those ones, or is it more like these ones? And then I'll kind of try
Oh,
and be
wow.
really, really cerebral about it, just because I can't decide based on how I feel about it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But another thing is probably kind of weird. Well, maybe not. I mean, people write stories based off of their dreams all the time. Actually, the one I'm writing right now is more or less based off of a dream I had. And a dream isn't technically an idea, so.
Sure. Yeah. It's your subconscious doing you a solid.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. I was going to ask you where the idea for this one came from. So that's good to
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. It was just this weird dream I have. Some of my dreams are more coherent than others. This is one of the ones that was kind of very well formed, if that makes any sense.
Almost all of my dreams are very narrative and have like a natural beginning and a natural ending. And even if they go into weird surrealistic territory, it always makes some kind of sense as a story.
Yeah.
Maybe that's a TI thing. I don't know. I'd have to check into that. I think that's an interesting thought though.
Yeah, that's true. I don't even know. It would be interesting to look into dreams a lot more.
I did one video on dreams with Leon from Type Tips, but
That's actually how I found your channel.
that one? Okay.
Yeah, because I followed Leon.
Oh, okay. Yeah, he made a little announcement. Forgot
Mm-hmm.
about that. Okay, interesting. I'm actually going to be talking to him again pretty soon about Enneagram stuff and dreams again. It's not going to be a very focused conversation, but I think it'll be good. But we'll be
That's
talking on his channel, so look out for that.
okay.
Let's see. Wonder. So if I told you, not that I would ever do this, but if I said, "Hey, by the end of the day, I want you to give me 10 story ideas," would the actual generation process be hard, or would it just be your subjective sense of their value? Like, could you give me like 10 ideas? Could you?
Definitely.
Okay.
I could give you 100 ideas.
All right. It's a deal.
I'm not even exaggerating.
You said it, not me.
No,
You have my email, so
yeah, making ideas is not the hardest thing in the world. I mean, in my opinion,
okay.
it's not hard at all. You just have to make connections between things. That's the kind of the definition of an idea. And
Yeah.
making connections between two things is not that hard. You just look at two things, random things, and then you make a connection between them.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really good. I think that in the same way I could give you 100 FI sort of like evaluations, but they would all be very, very, very bad. That's something that Michelle and I kind of email about on occasion. It's like she was who I was referring to earlier as far as like just follow your FI. And I'm like, I really can't do that. I need to find my own way through this problem.
Yeah, yeah.
Let's see. Looking at the comments here. They've got somebody else who is not Michelle, but I do not know what they said Cocomoncho, which I don't know what that means, so I'm gonna let that be.
Okay.
Um, honestly, I feel like I've exhausted my questions. Um, I guess you could, if you wouldn't mind, saying a bit about, I guess, the concept of like the typological shadow. Like, do you feel like you ever leverage your shadow functions, or have you learned to in order to be a better writer? Actually, you know
Um,
what? I'm not out of gas at all. I have a few more questions I could ask you, so take that one and we'll run with it.
okay. So shadow self being TESINEFI,
Hmm.
ESTJ. Yes, I do try
Right.
to use that. Especially like, the problems I was saying where I'd be TI and I wouldn't be intelligible. I feel like TE is like the complementary part where the things they say are not necessarily accurate, but at least you understand. You know what I mean? That would be a TE thing, I feel like. And so
Yeah.
I try to be more TE. You know what I mean? And I also try to make sure that things I say are factually accurate, which is somewhat TI, but also somewhat TE.
Yeah.
Um, uh, because TI sometimes in my experience, as long as it works with my mental framework, I don't necessarily care as much if it's, if other people kind of, if it's verifiable, but
Right.
I try and be aware of that. SI, like I said, sometimes I move so fast when I'm writing that it just takes way too little time, and way too little words, and I just say, well, this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened, and this happened, and then I don't give any weight to what's happening, if that makes any sense, because I have weight in it in my mind, you know what I mean? I like these characters, I like what's happening, I'm very interested in it, but I have to
Right.
give enough time for the reader to actually respond to it, or kind of have their own impression. So that would be
Yeah.
where I'm kind of slowing down a little bit, I feel like.
Okay. Yeah.
I may be wrong about SI, but I feel like that is the impression
Well,
I have.
no, I think you're right. I know that Alex and Calypso from INTJ and INFP Coffee have talked about um, SE and I as being like a very plot driven axis in writing, and any SI is definitely more timeless. And I see that in my writing a lot, where I will just sort of like weave through different moments, and it's not like a progression of events necessarily. So I think, yeah, that in your case, if you just have like the events, but you're not like slowing down to kind of show us like, let this moment breathe and like show its kind of like greater timeless meaning
Exactly.
in the context of the whole story. Yeah, that can be a
Yeah.
problem.
So TE and SI obviously are the ones that I'm strongest, even though I don't value them as much and they don't come as naturally to me.
Yeah.
So I do use those. Like I said, I did kind of try and conform myself to FI standards a lot when I was younger. I'm not even sure why I picked FI. It may just be because of what slot it was. Maybe there's just some natural thing where you go to that for meaning when you feel like your life is meaningless. I don't know, whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, I ended up trying to use FI a lot, which was not particularly good, and didn't make any. It didn't help my writing either. I didn't do great writing when from an FI perspective, which makes sense.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of wary about trying to use NE and FI. I'm not really sure what role they should play, honestly. I'd like to think about it more.
Right.
I've been thinking about it. I mean, what role would it play? Because they're kind of, I wouldn't say useless, but they're kind of dangerous
Mhm.
functions. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? So I'm not really, I don't know.
Yeah, maybe it's better, especially early on, to only focus on the strong shadow functions. But
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe I um I kind of relate. I see a parallel with how I used to be very drawn to. It's not a complete parallel. I'm getting like more and more tongue tied as we go on. Um, it's not a complete parallel, but I used to be sort of, I guess, fascinated with and would idealize my like the shadow functions for me. So I thought that like the NISE thing was what it was all about, and I tried to conform to that so much early on as a writer, and I couldn't do it at all. Like I was really poor at executing on that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and same with like FI and TE to a degree as well. But I don't know. So I've written like good things before, but I feel like I didn't write anything of real like substance until I embraced my NE. And I used to hate NE writers, which I think kind of ties into what you were saying earlier about you've been seeking out the opposite experience in what you read.
Yeah.
But now I have a greater appreciation for everything, and by developing that, I've kind of accepted like, oh, this is just how I do it, and there are other good writers who do it the way that I do it, so I shouldn't beat myself up so much.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. Um, so I feel like I meant to ask these questions earlier, but what do you think are your strengths as a writer? And could you tie those to being an ISTP? And then what do you think your weaknesses are? Same question.
I'm not sure what my strengths are. I feel like a lot of times when you ask for feedback from people, you're kind of asking for criticism, if that makes any sense. So I haven't really got a lot of positive feedback over
Mhm.
time, which, thinking back, that's probably not a great thing, because if you don't know what your strengths are, you know, you might lose them or not use them as much as you should or whatever.
Yeah.
But I think the weird thing is that, considering that I am an E-polar, one of the more positive things I've heard over time is that I'm so creative,
Hmm.
which is, I don't know, it's just kind of weird to me. I'm not sure what's going on with that, but I don't know.
Well, I think SE can be creative in its own way
Yeah, obviously.
of, yeah, giving someone like an experience, a sensory experience. I want to give somebody like an ideational experience. I don't really think about, you probably want people to like visualize your stories, and
Yeah.
I can't really do that whenever I read, or it's like so low resolution that it doesn't even matter.
Hmm.
I almost experience it purely as language and concept, even if it's like about a person. It
That's
might
interesting.
say something about my brain being broken as opposed to me being an ENTP. I don't know.
I don't know. But yeah, that is true. I'm always trying to give like this experience visual, or in some degree a mental experience, because I want them to be interested or to think really hard about
Yeah.
something, or
Yeah.
emotional experience, because I want them to, like the characters, or feel heartbroken, or feel whatever. Um, so
Mhm.
I'm very interested in experience, and maybe the reason why I tend to go towards the more weird end of topics is just because I feel like that's a more vivid experience. I mean, people live lives, and that's normal. You know what I mean? So I'm like, well, you can experience something else. You
Mhm.
can, experience aliens, or experience, whatever. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and that shows in what you were saying earlier about how you want it, even if it's not a real experience, you want it to like have the logic of a real experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think that there's definitely something to that, and I think that that's also probably a strength, even if you don't see it that way. It's very easy to be blind to our strengths.
Yeah. Yeah. I know.
So,
Um.
as for weaknesses,
Yeah.
what do you have to say for yourself?
Well, based on feedback I've gotten, well, personally, what I would say weaknesses are, I would say that I kind of get off. I'm writing, and I write very linearly, right? So, and sometimes I'll kind of forget where I started, if that makes
Mhm.
any sense, like what I wanted to do in the first place, and then I get partway through it, and then I'm at a different place, and then I'm not happy with that. You know what I mean? If I want to write a book, a certain kind of book, or a certain thing, then that's what I want to do. You know what I mean? And if I get partway through and it's somewhere else, then I'm not satisfied with that.
Yeah.
So I wish, one thing I wish about myself is that I could keep better track, and I have been doing better this time, actually. Just probably because I'm older, more mature, or whatever.
Yeah.
Um, but as far as criticisms from other people, where what they said, it's problems, I've already mentioned that people find it hard to understand what's happening sometimes,
Mhm.
especially when it's a shorter piece of fiction. I don't actually write short stories, and I don't even like reading them unless I basically, unless the experience is long enough for me to get really into it, then I don't really. It feels like a waste of time to me, and that's the
Yeah.
same with writing. Unless I'm able to get into it and have the time to make everything work,
Mhm.
then it just completely fails. Um,
Yeah, a short story is often better as like a thought experiment or
Yeah,
something. For me, that's how I typically use them.
yeah. And that's not really something that's not one of my strengths.
Yeah.
So yeah, not being able to understand what's happening, and then the other one is um I also mentioned this before, not feeling connection to the characters.
Right.
Um,
Okay.
so yeah, and I understand the one where it's hard to understand. I understand the first criticism where they're like, it's hard to understand what you're saying, and I kind of know where they're coming from, and I kind of have a solution to use TE, try and make it work and stuff like that. But as far as the other criticism, yeah, I'm actually still to this day somewhat confused about what to do about that one. I'm kind of
Yeah. Yeah. That seems like a trickier one, and that I don't know. Would you say that oh gosh, I'm getting so do you think that that is connected to lower FE?
I would imagine so, probably.
Yeah. Well, let me say that Michelle is not the only person who would be happy to read your writing and give you feedback, but no pressure.
Okay.
Um, I think that I'm pretty good at like detecting things like that and offering advice or feedback, but maybe
Yeah.
I'm out of line here, so no pressure.
I feel
Um,
like maybe it's just because well, now just a second, I just thought of something. Maybe it's because it's the whole moving too quickly or not taking enough time. Because it may be like
yeah.
an FE over FI thing. Because I know FE is extroverted feeling, right? And it's about expressing feeling, but at the same time, it doesn't go as deep.
Mhm.
Um, and I know when I first started writing when I was younger, I actually still have some of that stuff. It'd be interesting to look at, but it was like drama. Every single sentence, somebody was dying or crying or or, or adopting somebody or finding a long lost relative or something.
Yeah.
And,
That that's awesome.
and that was because I didn't have any time for anything else. You know what I mean? Who wants to read something else? That'd be boring.
Wow.
So it might just be that I don't know. Maybe I just move too fast through the emotional thing, or I'm like, oh, this person's sad right now or upset, and then I don't give enough weight to that, and then I'm just someplace else by the next
Yeah.
paragraph. I don't know.
Yeah, it could just be an example of needing to let a moment breathe again.
Yeah,
Yeah. And, let all of your adoptions and all of your murders, yeah, let them have a little time to
yeah.
to
Sink in.
to sink in. That's awesome. That's really funny. Okay, so I guess would you have any advice? I'm kind of coming to the end of my questions, and also I need to eat breakfast sometime soon.
Okay.
But um, do you have any advice for like a young ISTP who wants to write but doesn't really know where to begin? How do they work with that personality to be the best writer they can be?
Um.
And if it helps, you can think about it in terms of your younger self. Like, what would you tell your younger self?
Yeah. I know because it's kind of a weird question because I'm having a hard time imagining an ISTP who wants to write. Um.
Yeah.
If that makes any sense.
No, it makes sense.
Um. I guess I don't know. Just um. I guess if the young ISTP has any knowledge about personality types, I would say that to find out about yourself and be okay with communicating the way just use SC and TI because that's what that's your strongest functions. I mean, there's no point in trying to be FI like a certain person did, or trying to do all these different things, or trying to be any because you like any like I do. There's no point in me trying to pursue that because I mean I'm not going to give anything to the world, you know what I mean? Or give anything to anybody or give anything to myself. You know what I mean?
Right.
So just focus on what you actually can do.
Right. Because you can do that better than other people can do what you can do. Does
I
that
guess.
make sense?
Something like that.
Uh, yeah, I guess what I'm trying to say is, like, if you thought about it in terms of cuisine, like, you I don't know, if you are from India and you have any culinary experience, you can make a better chicken tikka masala than some, like, white dude who's trying to make it in his kitchen. So, there's that. This is a bad analogy, so bad. But, yeah, focusing on your strengths, you can do your strengths better than you can do other people's weaknesses,
Yeah.
basically,
Yeah. Yeah.
and better than people who don't have the same strengths can do your strengths. And by getting good at what you are naturally inclined to be good at, I think once you build that foundation, you can, like, start to try to spice it with, like, here's a little any flavor, but
Yeah.
I am an ISTP writer, and now I'm just, like, broadening my palette and expanding myself a little bit.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Thanks for thanks for working with me on that one. I didn't I kind of dropped the ball, but well, awesome. That's very good advice if I do say so myself, and not because of my contribution at all.
Okay.
Um, all right. Well, I think that's all I've got. So, if you want to stick around for a minute, I'm going to stop the broadcast, and then we'll actually still be in conversation. We can do a postscript, little post-mortem, if you will, if you want. But
Okay.
yeah, that's all
Sure.
I've got. So, thanks everybody for tuning in. Please check out Jatshepsut's channel. I hope I'm saying that right. Please check out the artist formerly known as Dark Salmon. Uh, and yeah, thanks for tuning in today. All right. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Stop, bro.